So to me, it really feels like these concerts are avenues for people, singers, to vulnerably and bravely share their own experiences. And then we use the music to emotionally connect the audience to those stories. And that's, to me, I think we're creating conversations and creating new ways for people to understand issues that they might not have had as much intimate connection to.
Hello and welcome to Art Restart, where we explore how artists are reinventing their fields and building a new landscape for the arts. I'm Piercarlo Talenti, the producer and editor of this podcast, which is brought to you by the Thomas S. Keenan Institute for the Arts at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. In this episode, we'll be speaking with choral director, arranger, and composer Alexander Lloyd Blake. In 2016, while earning his doctorate in music at the University of Southern California, Alex founded the choral group Tonality. His initial aim was to create a choral ensemble that would represent and celebrate the full diversity of Los Angeles' population. He accomplished that, and then a couple of years later, Tonality started to focus each concert on social justice issues, ranging from global warming to gun violence. The piece we're currently hearing is titled 1232 Life, composed by Alex himself. It calls attention to the three strikes laws around the country that have imposed life sentences on countless people. Tonality's repertoire is as varied as its membership, ranging from classical music to contemporary pieces in a mix of styles and genres, but one thing remains central: Alex's commitment to harnessing the power of choral music to foment social change. The choir has garnered nationwide attention. In 2020, Tonality received the Chorus America ASCAP Award for Adventurous Programming. And in 2022, Alex and Tonality's work were featured on The Kelly Clarkson Show. They've released 2 albums, and just this past spring, Tonality won its first Grammy for performing on composer Carla Petullo's album, So She Howls. Alex spoke to me from his home in LA. I'd read in an interview that he had wanted Tonality to be about intentional respect, which made me think, of course, that coming up as an artist, he had probably experienced disrespect, whether intentional or not. So I asked him to describe what that disrespect looked and felt like.
Sure. So I started singing gospel music. That's how I got into the art of choral singing in church. And when I joined choirs in middle school and then just kept going, specifically classical choirs, I recognized sometimes the music that I would recognize from my church experiences were performed, but they were treated differently, either kind of guesstimated in terms of the style, the performance practice. And the more I studied classical music and the more I learned about how we revere some of these composers, it was just very evident that if the composers were mentioned at all when it came to any type of gospel or African American spirituals or anything like that, it just seemed like a very easy, laissez-faire kind of situation. And so the more I studied, the more I realized it wasn't just music of Black cultures, but really non-Western European music was treated in this way in a number of incidences. And I thought, of course, I would assume most of this is indirect, but a lot of us find some connections, some cultural ties or connections to music. And so when you start to feel like there's a system in place that values certain music over others, I think the cultures from which that music comes also starts to feel a little devalued. And I thought it would be a worthy experiment to try to put together some type of choir where No one had to feel like that. And the way that I had studied classical music could be the way that we go about studying and performing and respecting all types of music, and therefore the people who are represented by that music.
So, in terms of intentional respect in tonality, I'm sure, of course, that has an impact on what you choose to sing. But I wonder if you can talk about how you center intentional respect in your leadership and choral directing style.
Yeah, I think really it's about collaboration. I think it's first about the awareness and also releasing the responsibility to know it all. I grew up with the culture I grew up with, but I grew up speaking English. Some other languages I've tried to work on, but I know what I know and I can learn and have learned, different styles. But if we can work with different artists who can come in or who are in the choir and they can really help to hone in on some of those nuances that you can't even find, in the written music. I find that that is a benefit to everyone in the room as opposed to people having to sit through someone. I mean, the best mid scenario, someone who's worked really hard but doesn't know, the inner workings of a particular style, or what I've had to endure, and I think a lot of people have, someone who has not done much work, any work, and who will just kind of create some kind of caricature of something they might have heard. And so for us, and for me, it's really just when we choose pieces, if there are pieces in different styles, that's a benefit of being in LA, I guess. But yeah, working with people, asking questions. Even now, if people don't live with us, there's Zoom. There are ways of getting in touch with different practitioners who can really help as experts in those different cultural genres.
Right. Can you talk about a moment when you thought you knew it all, but you had to in fact be educated on a piece you're going to sing?
Luckily, I don't know if there have been many instances where, because that's how Tonality started, asking people to come in. But I will say there was a whole concert theme that I had to be educated on.
Oh, what was that?
So in 2017, like the 2017-2018 season was when we started to do our social justice concerts. And so I just kind of chose three subjects. And one of those subjects was women's rights. That was just kind of on the top of mind. And we had decided that subject right before the Me Too movement really took kind of a national stage. And so we had decided the theme, but we had not created a concert. And so I thought, what a timely, place to do a Me Too concert, to really talk about domestic violence and all these things. Then I remember thinking, how many concerts have you been in about like Black music, Black History Month? And it was obscenely clear that no one had asked anyone from that culture. And so I said, maybe I should not try to create this thing by myself. And so I asked some singers, some composers we had worked with, some board members, and a co-conductor to meet with me and talk. And we all sat in this room and I said, I have this great idea. We're going to do a Me Too concert. It's really going to talk about the experiences of women and yeah, it's going to be really powerful. And the women in the room said, you know, women's assault, those are not women's issues. Those are men's issues that women have to deal with.
Mhm.
If you want to talk about women's like rights, women's power, like talk about women's voices. You can talk about the silencing of women's voices and the strength of voices, which would include what women have to endure, but it does not create a whole concert around men's issues. So that's what we did. And I said, it was beautiful to have female audience members come up to me and say, thank you so much. This is not what I was expecting. And it felt really, affirming to be here. And I thought, what is lost by asking those questions? Because we could have done another concert, and I'm sure some people would have found that powerful, but I think certainly the perspective that should have been centered would have been missed.
Right. And all it took was one important meeting.
Right. And I
Yeah.
mean, it just took because I think people want to help, but it's
Yeah.
really us as leaders getting out of our own way. And if I may be so bold, I feel like educational systems, there is no more dangerous place to not know something, ironically. I feel like we are not really taught that, like, it's okay not to know. You don't have to have all the answers.
Wow. Because you also teach high schoolers. Do you teach them that lesson as well?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
When I will bring some of the music that we've done in tonality. I don't teach anymore with at Loxa, unfortunately. I loved the students. But when I was teaching, we would do some tonality concerts or the songs from those concerts, and we would sit and just talk. And I would ask questions and let them talk. It was really more guiding them talking than me talking at them about the subject matter. And I always tell people, if you ever have any kind of doubt that young people are not on top of what's going on and don't have really smart, insightful ways of thinking about some of these very difficult issues, you should just go to a class or you should just create an environment to hear them speak.
Hmm.
There's of course guidance and there's lessons in listening that I can help guide in the room as they're working through these things, but they are talking very intelligently about, in my opinion, about what's going on.
Do you have the same kind of conversations with Tonality's membership?
It's a required part of every concert.
Oh, okay. So tell me more about that.
So, yeah, it kind of came about accidentally. We were working on this piece, the Norman Dienerstein's When David Heard. Beautiful 8-part choral setting of David Heard, Absalom was slain. Difficult to tune. It is a long piece, longer than most of the choral works I think that a lot of choirs do. And so we just couldn't tune it. It was not tuning well. I remember just kind of we were going over the same part over and over, and someone this is a part of our gun violence concert, and so
Okay.
someone had told a story. Someone just kind of stopped the rehearsal and talked about how their best friend was killed by that friend's ex-partner, and how the parents were just screaming over the casket. And in that choral work, there's a moment where the sopranos scream like a high B flat as the choir comes in under them. And after that story, after that moment that we kind of all just took to connect emotionally, we never had a problem tuning that piece. It gives me chills every time I think about that. And since have never had a problem tuning that piece. And as someone who I majored in music, but I love math. I love the nuts and bolts of things. There is something that brought us together, not just as, better musicians, but as better people, and connected us through the emotional kind of sharing of that. And it really taught me that you can't do these concerts without the emotional safety and connectedness of the artist in the room and the storytelling. It really became and has become a central, or I should say, remains a central part of our concerts. Every rehearsal cycle we always set aside a time for us just to talk about the issues. People tell stories, or we'll learn depending on the subject. And then we have people tell stories in the concert. So to me, it really feels like these concerts are avenues for people, singers, to vulnerably and bravely share their own experiences. And then we use the music to emotionally connect the audience to those stories. And that's, to me, I think we're creating conversations and creating new ways for people to understand issues that they might not have had as much intimate connection to.
Your membership reflects the diversity of the many cultures that live in Los Angeles. So there must be a multiplicity of opinions. Have there ever been times when there's been disagreement?
Yes. And there have been times that, I've been questioned about music. The point is not for us all to agree. I think it's just for us to understand a perspective or perspectives that are possible. And I think for the work we do when we have those types of disagreements, to make sure people are heard is like the big part. I remember, we did a concert on climate change and there was a very intense talk about the vegan lifestyle and a very clear opinion about how being vegan is one of the best ways to decrease your carbon footprint. And the talk really came, I think, really centered around that issue. I mean, the concert was about climate change, but we really kind of stayed there for a while. And yeah, the conversation was really then about like how to allow that perspective to be presented in a way that did not turn people off, but also didn't shut any side down. Because I think, yeah, these concerts, in my opinion, it's like, you can present things to people, but to me, these concerts are about sharing personal experiences more than telling people what to do.
It makes me want to ask because you hinted this earlier that your audiences certainly at home tend to be more liberal. So kind of in a way it's a choir preaching to the choir. And I wonder, other than appearances in a national show like the Kelly Clarkson show, do you have any plans or thoughts about reaching those people who just to start with would have an opposing viewpoint?
So funny, I've been asked this so many times, like, when you're going to go into the red states and do the hard work? And I said, trust me, I'm doing the hard work. Honestly, my, find a nice way of saying this. There is so much opportunity to create impact among people who generally believe the same thing we believe. I'm from North Carolina. I come from a small town. I'm from Jacksonville, more conservative area. So I understand that sentiment. But since moving to LA, I realized there's a lot of work we can do. There's a big difference between mentally knowing something is wrong and actually doing something about it. I think asking people about homelessness, generally, you're going to find this an issue. I mean, of course, I've said this is before the Supreme Court's recent actions, but you ask people about homelessness and you say, should something be done? Should we help these people? And of course, the overwhelming answer is yes. I said, great. Name 3 organizations. Name one organization that you're involved with, that you even know about, that's doing this work. And then no one has an answer.
Hmm.
And to me, it's a big problem that everyone is talking about and issues, and that's where it begins and ends. And I feel like we have made intellectual arguments out of situations that affect people's livelihoods. So our concerts, to me, are not necessarily currently about trying to convince opposing mindsets of what we're talking about. First, for me, I think our work is to bring in people who agree with us and say, since you agree, let's turn this from an intellectual stance to an emotional one. And then let's bring in the organizations who are directly involved and actually have you be a part of the solution and not just another voice screaming into the void or screaming to the echo chamber.
So you've been leading the group now for 8 years, I think.
Yes,
Right? What was the toughest lesson along the way? Did you make any mistakes along the way that you'd be willing to share?
sure. I think the group grew a lot after the pandemic. The opportunities grew. Yeah, the calls, we were no longer just producing concerts in churches. We were singing with Bjork. We were singing with Kelly Clarkson. We were singing on the score of Space Jam 2. And I think the organization grew so quickly. And of course, I'm receiving all the emails. I'm in it. I'm seeing it change as it goes. I think one of the things I had to learn was even as the group grows, it can't grow any sooner or any quicker than the mentality of everyone involved. We went from a group of, we're working with the same 24 people to now we have a roster of 70 to 90 singers because, we'll get a call to
who
go.
can rotate in and out.
Yes, because,
I
everyone is
see.
busy and we could, we were calling the same 24, but we were never getting the same 24. And so kind of having to switch to a model where we now have a roster of singers from which we call for all concerts. It's kind of like a more contractual thing as opposed to you're going to see the same singers because it's impossible. There are just too many choirs, too many amazing opportunities. We can't lock singers down because we can't pay to lock singers down. It's a huge mentality shift. And I think being in on this side, I was, oh, well, people will understand, people are saying no to us all the time. But of course, if you are one person, you only have your experience. And I think that was something that I overlooked as the organization grew. We just didn't have the infrastructure to really kind of sit, or I should say, we did not sit and really kind of make sure that everyone understood the changes. And I think I was so kind of busy doing and kind of in the growth that I didn't think, oh, it's actually really important to bring people along with the understanding of that. And so, the organization had,
So you made a lot of changes without communicating with the membership, basically. Is that what you're saying?
or taking time to really make sure. I think there are communications, but they were not thorough. And there wasn't really time to really make sure that people understood. It was like, okay, this is a change, not this is why the changes are happening.
Right. And then because you do so much, not only are you Tonality's artistic director and conductor, but you also perform, you arrange. I wonder if you can talk about what current or upcoming personal artistic project you're most looking forward to, whether it's with Tonality or not.
Sure. I I need to find a better way of talking about it, but because it scares me. I applied for a grant to write a piece. I was talking to one of our board members, one of my friends, who is a film composer, Joe Trapanese, about how kind of like considering Matthew Shepard, I was like, there should be more pieces like this. And I think it'd be great if we started talking about, yeah, different people, different experiences. And I had mentioned Ahmaud Arbery because I had done a project about Ahmaud with a friend, Danielle Withers. We kind of put together this project during the pandemic. And we were already working on this in relative silence about police brutality things when George Floyd was murdered, which is really bizarre. I mean, I think the whole world kind of turned their eye to George Floyd, but Ahmaud Arbery happened a couple of weeks before. And I still remember thinking, like, I don't really feel like that story got its time. There's so much in it. And I felt like someone should write about it. And Joe said, well, you should do that. You're a composer. I was like, I'm an arranger. I take melodies that have already been written and I like to do fun things with them. But I, never consider myself a composer. But he told me, maybe think about it. And so there are some grants that came about and we applied and I assumed that, they were going to work with seasoned composers. We applied for two opportunities, one opportunity to work at the Copeland House and the MAP Fund, and we received both of them on this idea that I would write this piece. I thought, oh, wow. Okay. So that's what I'm working on. The piece is called Running From, Running To. And it really, yeah, it's a piece that really speaks about using many themes, running themes, no puns there, of running to speak about the whole perspective around, or at least my reflection around that story, how Ahmaud was running when he had the incident with those three vigilantes, three murderers, how Black men continue to have to run from police, from these systems that have never really seen us as fully human, how we as society run from ugly things, but how eventually we all start to move toward collective understanding. And so this piece is going to be premiered in May 2025.
And do you have a where it's going to be premiered yet?
Yes, it will be premiered at the Wallace Annenberg Center of Performing Arts in Beverly Hills. We just started, or we will start singing there. And so it'll be kind of a big premiere, which is all slightly intimidating. But I luckily have received a lot of insight, and it's such a big story.
And it will be Tonality performing it?
It will be Tonality performing it.
I see. And when you said we, are you collaborating with someone on the composition?
I have started to work with people just to kind of get ideas, still kind of figuring out what all that looks like. Like I said, it's a multi-movement piece. So I've done, 4-minute arrangements. So to have to kind of do a piece for half an hour with some orchestral setting, I did arranging. I have an arranging minor for the doctorate. It's like, it's all within the ability, but it's just a huge stretch of something that I've had to do. But I keep kind of telling myself, one, I'm not telling a mod story. It's been told. I'm just sharing my reflection of it. And I think the more I lean into that, this is an opportunity to give another perspective and another way of thinking and hearing about such an important story that we are all involved in. Yeah, it's certainly feels like a colossal undertaking, but it also feels like a very special opportunity that I'm honored to be, able to do.
You can find a longer written version of this interview at uncsa.edu/artrestart. If you enjoyed this episode, won't you please share it with a friend? Your word of mouth is so crucial to us reaching new listeners. Our theme music is by Shanghai Restoration Project. I'm Piercarlo Talenti, and on behalf of the Thomas S. Keenan Institute for the Arts at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts, thank you for listening.